David and I have that beautiful blessing, which we picked up on a sort of piece of ceramic art while visiting our partner church in Transylvania, hanging right in our kitchen over the sink. As we do our dishes, we can look up at that blessing. I want to open my reflection by sharing a story that comes from the Hasidic tradition about the child of a rabbi. And this child, this boy, his son, was often wandering in the woods. At first, his father let him wander, but over time he became concerned, for the woods could be very dangerous. And the father was afraid about what might lurk there. He decided to discuss the matter with his child. One day he took him aside and said, "You know, I have noticed that each day you walk into the woods, and I wonder, why do you go there?" The boy said to his father, "I go there to find God." "That is a very good thing," the father replied, "and I am glad that you are searching for God. But my child, don't you know that God is the same everywhere?" "Yes," his son answered, "but I am not." I resonate completely with the point of view of that boy. It is true that we Unitarian Universalists do not believe that there are some lands and places set aside as sacred, while others are profane. Yet it is also true that certain spots invoke in me a deeper awareness of the holy, or of my connection with nature, or my connection with humanity, or like Laurel from that shuttle, my connection with the whole universe. The photograph on the cover of your order of service today is one such place for me. It is a cascading waterfall located in the center of a village called Rensselaerville, nestled in the Helderberg Mountains in Albany County. It is one of my heart's homes. I have spent a part of every summer and several autumns walking in that place, where many of my ancestors also walked over the last couple hundred years. The smells and the sounds and the sights of the fields and the hills and the valleys and those falls have seeped into my bones. While I admittedly love the energy of the big city, this is the place where I have learned to listen to the whispers of our earth. I remember the experiences as a small child of sitting in a field by my cousin's home, composing odes to the clouds and the blue sky. Or I remember walking at night and hearing about the constellations as told by my father. I remember the experience of galloping on horseback across the land and the feeling of freedom in the moment, and the feeling of fear when the horse bucked on an old piece of stove, throwing me to the ground. I remember getting old enough that those beloved falls seemed like a height that I could actually dare to climb. And I wondered, what magic might be up there at the top? It turns out that the magic above was much like the magic at the bottom of the falls, only a little bit sweeter. The cool rush of the water, the slime, that green, beautiful slime, and the cool of the rocks pulsing with life. The awareness of being so small and yet a part of it all, and the magnificent view, up or down. Every year I would return wondering what would be different the next time I would visit. The flowers at different seasons, the way a violent storm rerouted a part of the falls as happened this autumn, and what would remain eternal. While nature is certainly a big part of what beckons me to that spot of the world, the buildings, some of them anyway, are sacred to me as well. 3 years ago, my husband and I got married in the church where my great-grandparents and my grandparents exchanged their vows. Well, actually, the church building had to move at one point, so it was in the same community that they cared for and worked for and loved, but not the same building, quite literally where my great-grandparents exchanged their vows, but it was where my grandparents did. The congregation is Presbyterian, but very liberal. Throughout the summer, they have interfaith guests, even the occasional Unitarian, as well as Presbyterians who fill their pulpit. And like us, they're one of the few welcoming congregations who are open to gay and lesbian members. And one of the ministers who served that congregation in the 80s and early 90s was a gay man, and he served there until he passed away. Like us, they are a congregation that struggles with their roof. And in fact, the steeple was on the ground by the building this summer because they were working on it at the time, the early fruits of a capital campaign that went underway to ensure that this, their second building, would be solid, safe, and beautiful for at least the next couple of decades. It is quite striking to pair this scene with that of my great-grandmother's home on the old dairy farm. The land, I must tell you there, the grasses are literally growing up through the porch and even the living room as the wooden home returns to the earth. The family that bought the property 30 years ago keep it for some reason, even though they haven't been back there for over 20 years. There are rumors about what might be buried there. We had an enormous family reunion a couple of years ago and walked through the home and listened to stories about my father throwing butterballs up on his grandmother's ceiling, which apparently plopped down in the middle of plates during an important meal. The buildings in that place, in that corner of the world, also beckon to me, and they remind me something of what is transient and what is permanent in this life, and to whom I am connected. I want to invite you just to call out if there's a place like that for you. And there's certainly more than one for me. But just call out the name of a site or a place or a building. Austin mentioned museums.
The Torn. Yosemite.
Alison Wonderland statues of Central Park.
The fjord in Norway. Birchwood Lake.
Apple Barney.
Chucky Hollow.
My hammock.
That's what I had for you.
Colorado River.
Beaver, Wyoming.
Morristown. Angel Tree and
Overlook Creek.
Yes,
The Grand Canyon.
We could go on, I know. All of the places in which we move, in which we live, we work, worship, study, play, and love, have stories to tell. We are shaped by and have the power to shape these stories. So moving from some of the natural wonders, let me ask you, let's go to your hammock maybe. That's in this direction. What does your home, or if you don't have a home, what does your room say about you today? What are its stories? Is it messy because it tells the story that you love your work and you would rather spend time with your family doing things together than cleaning? Is it a story of clutter because you love to collect things that you associate with memories and people you have known and loved and have a hard time letting go? Is it clean and sparse because you value serenity and simplicity and are less attracted to possessions as a way of holding on to memories. If you could change something about the story of that space, what would it be? And how might it affect your well-being? And what does the story of your workplace tell, whether an office, a school, or a park, and so forth? And how is it shaping you? Have you noticed that some offices and schools look like they could be entered into a prison competition? Walled off from the outdoors and with few places to escape? When you think about where you work, is there a feeling of being trapped that the building tells? Or are you lucky enough to work in a space that exemplifies beauty, or modernity, or the wish to green our planet? Does the story of the place where you work fit with the mission of your organization, or your role in your organization? And thank goodness we are not helpless, even if the building design is lacking in something. How could you change something about your area to reflect your purpose in that place? And I'm going to leave you with a minute to think about your home and where you spend your time during the day, if they're not the same place. What story does it tell? What story do you want it to tell? Our place is no different. The building and grounds of the Morristown Unitarian Fellowship speak to us and shape us, and in turn we speak back. We collectively have the power to shape our property and who it is helping us to become. Remember, in this thought process, what is permanent and what is transient? And it is my hope that you, just like the congregation I talked about in Rensselaerville, are what is permanent. That is to say, the people, the beloved congregation, and that your needs and vision for today and the future supersede the building and grounds themselves as they are, although I too confess to loving them. Many of us have so many treasured memories in this place. David proposed to me in the labyrinth, for example, just to name one. Many of you have shared stories about your lives with me sitting together in my office or on a bench in the Memorial Garden, which, by the way, I think needs some tree limbs moved if we were to get back in there together. So many special things, conversations with youth and children, so many special memories in these places and these walls, and I know that you have so many. But again, it is what we do here that matters, what we are able to do here that matters, and who we are becoming in these spaces that matter. It is that I hope is permanent. This room is an interesting example of a space that tells stories about what we value. First, notice its shape. It is octagonal and the chairs can be moved around the room. I've already led 2 services this fall, one on the evening of September 11th and one on Rosh Hashanah in the round here. The room was intended originally, interestingly enough, to be longer. It wasn't originally sketched as an octagon. And actually there was to be a row of windows on both sides, And actually the ceiling was supposed to be slanted with greater height. Now, admittedly, more windows would have been lovely to let in more light, and I promise you the roof would have been better equipped to deal with the rain. And the greater height could invoke a sense of aspiration of what we want to do together. However, this is what was created, and this octagonal shape has helped tell us to tell stories about who we are. And it was exactly what we were going for on September 11th. The warmth of a community where we can sit in a circle looking eye to eye, where no one point of the room would enforce hierarchy. Wherever we are in this space, if I'm speaking from here or here or here, there's a sense of the round that is always invoked, always invoked. An octagon is the shape that's created when you cut off the corners of a square, a very inclusive shape where all can be seen and all can join in the circle. And there is beauty in how we have been shaped by this room as a people to this date, even if one day we were to change the look or the location of our meeting room. But I tell you one thing, from the outside, the room doesn't say much. I expect some disagreements with that after the service. If you look at it from this angle, it's just a giant brick red wall sort of covering the beautiful Georgian architecture. If you look through the windows, though, or the interest of the statue on that side of the room, there's certainly much to see. So if I put forth with our eyes, our current eyes today, that this room is totally inclusive of everybody, how many of you believe that to be true? I imagine you all believe it's a true vision. But how many of you believe this room is what the space reflects, totally inclusive of everybody who would worship with us? A few. And this isn't to call anyone out. It's a beautiful shape. I mean that sincerely. But one example is that people in wheelchairs can't enter this room very far. They're excluded from the middle, and certainly the spot where we often place our pulpit, or that we could move it around. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a speaker for a memorial service who had to be pretty much carried down by David and his wife so that he could at least get to the front of the room to share his stories about a loved one. The story that our grounds tell today in the aftermath of the storm is how many people do care for this beautiful, beautiful space that we hold to be of deep worth. If you had seen exactly how many branches had fallen down on the property, you would also see in your mind the image of many volunteers coming forth with chainsaws and their arms and legs ready to do work. A willingness to pitch in to make our sacred spaces safe once again. And if anyone's noticed the transformation of the second and third floor that's happened in the last couple of years, once again, you would see a people that care deeply about the future of their facilities. Or my favorite example, or there's several favorites, but I love that Elizabeth Bain, when she, at the service auction a couple of years ago, bid on the painting of 3 rooms, and Paul Snellgrove was then charged with painting the terrace room. And I view that as an extension that this fellowship is a part of her heart's home, as well as it is many of ours. What are other examples in this space? What are the stories that they tell? Last year, the Sacred Spaces Task Force was commissioned to help us to begin to discern a path for shaping the future of our facilities. And in particular, they studied the aspects of the financial feasibility of renovating and expanding this building, of buying raw land and building something else, and of finding another building and grounds to retrofit for our purpose. After all, even this building didn't start out as a congregation. Does anyone know what it started out as? A summer cottage. That's right. In 1912, it was created as a summer cottage, and we have made it into a beautiful congregation. And we added on this sanctuary when there was a need for that. So again, we are shaped by these spaces, and we have the power to shape our spaces as well. And this year, you are invited to add additional criteria beyond just the financing to the discernment process. What are the stories that this building and our grounds might say about our values of being green? Is it green? Is everywhere as green as we would wish it to be? What does it say about our green values in terms of environmentalism and also in terms of the transcendentalists? Many of you named connection with the outdoors as a doorway to the sacred. What about the aesthetics of this room or of the entire building? What about the location? We're a very regional congregation. And so many people live in Morristown and Morris Township, but some live elsewhere. What are the questions that we have about location? Again, what do we value in terms of location? Accessibility is one I already mentioned. And functionality is another. My guess is that if I were a teacher and had taught in the classrooms here and had ever entered a classroom with stuff all over my hands, it might be nice to have sinks in those rooms. It might be nice to have access to some modern technology. What is possible in this place or in another space? What do you care about? And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for just a minute and to think about the spaces in this room and to think about one story that is a positive testimony to this place. And one story that you think might need another chapter of change. So you're charged, while I'm on maternity leave and sabbatical, is that there are going to be opportunities for sacred conversations in the coming months to talk about these stories. What is it that we value about this space, and what is it that we would want to go on and continue as a community that cares about many different things? Love, justice, compassion, encountering the holy, one another, caring, community. I could go on, green values. I could go on, aesthetics. But what specifically do we mean by that? Because as we make a decision about the future of our facilities here, or even if it were elsewhere, it's not just going to be based on our wallets. It's going to be based on a vision, a common vision of what we value and of the story we are creating together. So hold on to those stories of love that you just invoked in your hearts about this place, and hold on to those stories that might need another chapter written. And please join in these sacred space conversations so that we, like that congregation with the steeple beside the building at the moment, can create a legacy that will be safe and solid and sacred and compelling for the decades to come. May it be so. Will you join with me in our closing song?